inflationary forces of the past 2 years are now slowly but surely turning into disinflationary forces. Let's start with food prices. I know that when all of us go to the supermarket, we are overwhelmed by how expensive food is. The Bank of Canada does not care. Not because they are not nice people, but because it's irrelevant. Remind your clients, inflation is a rate of change. If food prices went up by 10% last year, and today they are rising by only 5%, still rising by only 5%, this is disinflationary, not inflationary. And that's exactly what we see in energy, food, other commodities. Disinflationary, that's one thing. The other is supply chain. Very important to understand. Supply chain is back to normal. This has major implications for the Bank of Canada. First of all, the prices of goods are falling because you don't have supply chain issues. The other is the effectiveness of monetary policy, because now you have a situation in which all the inflation is coming not from supply, but from demand. Because if the inflation was coming from supply from outside the country, the Bank of Canada was powerless, impotent in its ability to deal with the situation. Believe me, Putin does not care about the fact that the Bank of Canada is raising interest rates. But now, 80% of inflation is coming from domestic sources. This means that the Bank of Canada is more effective in its ability to fight inflation, and therefore you don't have to take interest rates in the sky. And then you have profit margins among retailers. Let's face it, many retailers were hiding behind the fog of supply chain. You went to the store, you asked for this dishwasher, and they said, supply chain, China, India, but if you pay a bit more, we'll find one for you in the basement. That's exactly what happened. Now, supply chain is basically back to normal, no place to hide. Profit margins are down. A major disinflationary, underrated disinflationary force. And then you have real estate. How do we measure shelter inflation, which is 35% of inflation? Shelter inflation. It's not the price of houses. No, that doesn't go into the equation. It's commissions to real estate agents. It's rent. But the most important factor is what? Mortgage interest payments that are rising now for obvious reasons by 32%. So think about it for a second. The Bank of Canada is raising interest rates to fight inflation. Higher interest rates are adding to inflation vis-a-vis mortgage interest payments. It's absolutely crazy. It doesn't make any sense. By the way, the Bank of Canada is the only bank in the OECD that is using mortgage interest payments as part of the inflation calculations. The only bank. All the other banks, including the Fed in the US, don't use it. They use other things like rent. So, just for fun, what happens if you take mortgage interest payments out of the calculations? Inflation is back to 2%. Exactly on target, and that's why the Bank of Canada is overshooting. But then we have to discuss one more thing, and that's the labor market. Whatever inflation we have now is service inflation, not goods inflation. And service inflation, 80% is wages. So you want a narrative to discuss with clients about inflation, you want a narrative about interest rates, you must discuss the labor market. So every first Friday of the month, at 8:30 in the morning, we get the inflation numbers from Stats Canada. 8:30 in the morning, first Friday of the month. So at 8:29 in the morning, every economist is sitting in front of his air computer looking, waiting, anticipating the numbers. Believe me, it's very exciting. And every time we look at those vacancy rates, and they're falling like a stone. Why? Remember a year ago, nobody was able to find help? 1 million vacancies. I never bought it. I thought it was a mirage. Why? Because in Economics 101, they teach you, if you have a shortage of something, like housing, the price of this something will rise. The shortage was of low-paid individuals in the service sector. So their wage was supposed to rise. So we looked, bottom 20, bottom 40% of the distribution. Wages went up, but nothing consistent with 1 million vacancies. So we went to small businesses that employed 80% of those people, and we said, and they said, listen, economists like yourself are telling us that a recession is coming. I'm not going to raise wages 5 minutes before a recession. And I say, you're not going to raise wages, you don't need this person. It's very easy to press a button and say, I need 5 people. Show me the money. And that's exactly what's happening now. All those vacancies are dropping like a stone. The labor market is normalizing. I think I told some of you the story, but let me illustrate again why it's important. There is a measure at which, looking at people moving from one industry to another, one profession to another. And this measure went up to the sky during COVID. Why? Let's use an example. Let's assume in a normal recession, not this recession, a normal recession, you were an employee for Air Canada. You lost your job. You went on employment insurance for 6 months, and after 6 months, the recession is over, you went back to Air Canada or any other airline. Today, after 3 long years, you moved on. You are in a totally different occupation, totally different industry, doing totally different things. So if you were Air Canada, you have to start fresh, start hiring new people, and they did. How do I know that? The other day I took a flight from BC to Toronto. Air Canada. All the flight attendants were new, were green. How do I know that? They were extremely, extremely nice. So they did it. The labor market is normalizing at the speed of light, which means that wages are not going to rise in any significant way, and not a major disinflationary force. So inflation is going down the right direction, allowing the Bank of Canada to start tweeting about the possibility of cutting interest rates. So you're the Bank of Canada. What are you going to do? You are done raising interest rates. You are already overshooting by 50 basis points. When are you cutting? I don't think they will touch interest rates before June. There is a possibility that they will go in April, but for this you really need to see inflation going down and down and down. That will take a while. And they want to make sure that inflation is absolutely dead. So therefore, I suggest that they will start in June, by our March.